They robbed the Glendale mail, and the people all did say, oh, many miles away, it was robbed by Frank and Jesse James. Jesse had a wife, she mourned for his life, 3 children, they were brave. But one dirty coward, he shot him in the back. He laid Jesse James in the clay. Well, hey everybody, it's a little bit of my own arrangement of Jesse James, trying to lead us into a Q&A session here. Let's jump right in. I got some good questions. First, I want to address this great question I got from Lindsay. And Lindsay wrote in and asked if I could snap my fingers and magically have any banjo in the universe and have that banjo for my own, what banjo would that be? And it seems like a simple question, but damn, it was hard for me to answer. I pondered it for days, Lindsay. You've kept me up at night. And, you know, I had the usual, like, wild thoughts, like, well, I'd like to have, like, you know, Joel Sweeney's, first banjo, or whatever the hell, or I'd like to have that first banjo that somebody ever put the fat bass string on, or something like that. Or maybe one that was made of solid gold so I could go down to the pawn shop and sell it, right? But put all that in my mind, and what do I really want? What would I really get right now if I could have any banjo? Well, I gotta say it would be a nice brand new gourd banjo by one of the contemporary artisans, somebody like probably Pete Ross or Jeff Menzies. I think those guys are probably my 2 favorite contemporary banjo makers right now. So that's the answer to your question, Lindsay, honestly. If I could snap my fingers right now and have any banjo in the world that I wanted, I would love to have one of those old gourds that Pete Ross does that's like really historically accurate based off of a painting or a museum piece. I love those. And then just as much, I'd love to have one of Jeff Menzies. Jeff does some sort of, he's very historically minded too, but he's very artistic and he's not afraid to get wild, So if I could have a nice brand new gourd banjo by either of those 2 artists, that's what my choice would be. Thanks for that question, Lindsay. Let's see if we can get to somebody else here. Joseph wrote in and he says, excuse me guys. Joseph says, to my ear, you seem to get quite a deep, bassy tone from your banjo. Banjos aren't generally associated with a deep, bassy sound, but I wondered whether things like a skin head or tuning down, heavier strings, or older wood might contribute to that. Joseph says he plays a good time. And though it sounds good, I wonder if there's a bit more belly on older banjos like your Wayman. Well, thanks for that question, Joseph. You are right, sir. I would say that a good quality older banjo, as you say, is going to have more belly. I've never used that term. I like to say growl. I like a banjo that really roars almost, but as long as it growls, that's good. But I like a banjo that roars. And one thing, when George laid out a few banjos for me to buy from him that he had for sale, and this was the one. There was others that growled really nice, and I believe I bought another one that was real growly, but this one roared at me, I think it's got a good roar to it. Now, what contributes to that? Yes, I use a skin head. You'll also note that I use a very opaque goat skin head. The thickest skin head that I can find is what I'll use on these. I went for a long time with the transparent calf skins, but I have come back to these goat skin heads, these thick goats. Any thick animal hide will do. I like the thicker hide. I do tune lower, you guys know that. Right now I'm tuned all the way down to the neighborhood of E, the 2 or 3 steps down or something like that. And the heavy strings, probably, I've actually never even bought a set of heavy gauge strings, guys. I've always had mediums. I experimented with lights, but I didn't like them. And I always just used cheap medium gauge strings. And then you mentioned the older wood. Yeah, I think that has something to do with it. You'll see, guys, this banjo is maple, and it's a real pretty old piece of maple, the whole thing is. And you know, this is at least a 100-year-old banjo, and I think there is something to that. And the reason being that I think lumber in the old days, back in the 1800s, you had access to a higher quality lumber. You also had access to the same kind of lumber we have today, but back then there was more of those really big old growth trees that they were just lopping down, either in our forests or often in South American forests. If you have a mahogany neck or something, oftentimes those were, you know, those were taken out of South American rainforests. But this seems to be American maple, and it seems to have come out of a fine old tree. So I think that has something to do with it, the age and diameter of the tree, the density of that old hardwood. Yeah, and also there's just with the age of the instrument, even if it wasn't, you know, premium lumber, like, you know, just the age of it, I think that gets all of the air, and I don't know about that, but any lingering moisture or oil that's still in the wood is just gone after 100 years. And so every single fiber in your neck and in your hoop is just this hollow sound chamber. So you get really, really good sounding instruments. Great question, Joseph. We've got time for some more here. Let me see if I can pull this up. Oh, another question. Okay, our friend Zachariah wrote in, and he says, first, I'd like to say that I've really been inspired by your style and your work on Patreon. I was feeling quite discouraged by the rigid dichotomy of Scruggs versus clawhammer that's so prevalent out there, I guess, in the banjo world. And seeing your own authentic voice and playing has, in a way, given me permission to just play the way I like and not worry about the damn rules that these people impose on this instrument. Anyhow, well, you know, you guys know my view on that. You're right, Zach. So that being said, I'm curious about your overhand playing. Looking at the videos, you don't seem to have the long fingernails that most seem to employ for that technique. Do you find that you can play without a fingernail? Anyway, thanks so much for the great content. I can't wait to hear more. Zachariah. Well, Zach, you know, long story short, the whole thing about fingernails, you know, as best as I can tell, that's something that comes out of the European classical guitar tradition, and maybe the lute and stuff like that. But really the only people I've ever met who are really concerned about their fingernails like that are classical guitarists who even use like all 5 fingers, and they grow their fingers like, you know, like a Chinese emperor or something, and they use it like picks. And that's cool and all. And I even did try that when I was in college up in Boone, North Carolina, going to Appalachian State for a few years. I wasn't doing a lot of manual labor, at least, you know, only in the summertime would I actually get out and do any work in the dirt. And so I did grow my fingernails out, kind of not long, but longer on my right hand. I've always kept them, on your left hand, you better just have little nubs, because I hate snagging a fingernail up here or the fingernail getting in the way of what I'm trying to do up here. So on my left hand, I've always kept them nubs, but now guys, on my right hand, I keep these trimmed down to a nub too. I find that I've heard too many people at festivals complain, oh, I can't play this weekend because I broke my fingernail, you know, like, well, if you just don't have a fingernail, your fingers, it gets tough as nails, and you don't miss it, and you don't need it. And let me be proof of that. I've been playing for 20 years, and only for 3 of those years or 4 of those years have I maintained fingernails on my right hand, and I shortly abandoned that practice. It's not necessary. I would also point out, you know, think of Roscoe Holcomb, right? That guy was hard as nails. That guy was that tough old mountaineer. I don't think Roscoe Holcomb kept long fingernails on his hand. I don't think he could if he wanted to. I mean, he worked harder than me, and hell, I can't even do it. I'm out in the garden quite a bit, you know, forking mulch around, or digging holes, planting trees, or I'm sifting dirt through a screen trying to get good fine potting soil, and all these rocks and brambles and stuff. You can't keep a fingernail on your hand, you know. So just think about that. I don't think that Roscoe Holcomb or you know, George Pegram or Bill Birchfield or Creed Birchfield, these guys didn't worry about their fingernails. So, you know, Even, you know, Cousin Emmy, I'm sure she didn't give a damn about her fingernails. So don't worry about it, Zach. Try to, my advice is actually to keep them trimmed short and get used to that. Okay, guys, that's pretty good Q&A this morning. It's been a blast. I want to do some show and tell too. If you look behind me, I got some mail here, some mail call stuff, and I've got some other work pieces I want to show you guys. So, but I'm going to close this out for now, and just look out. You'll see me later. Hopefully today I'll get back here and post up again. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate your contributions and all this participation. Thanks. You'll see me again.